Thank you. I just want to put a bit of context around what happened today, and you'll see how my life goes. But there was a reporter out here from CBC earlier on who had come down and done one of those documentaries on my community. And he walked up to me and he said, "What are you doing here, Ron? There's no mines in Aamjiwnaang." And that's their context. They don't see the extraction. I went to a meeting in Carriers-Keenak territory in northern British Columbia, and David Suzuki screamed across the floor, "What are you doing here, Ron? It's a meeting for Western Indians." And I said, "Yeah, David, what are you doing here? It's a meeting for Indians." I get put in this place all the time because most people have no idea what goes on in my home. Has anybody heard of Aamjiwnaang? A few hands go up. National Geographic called me the most polluted spot in North America. That's a pretty credible publication, a very bold statement. The World Health Organization reaffirmed that statement. We're worse than the tar sands. I wish I was as bad as Fort Chip. We're worse. And I've been to Fort Chip. I've seen what goes on in that community. I've been down east. I see what goes on down east. I've been up into the fracking sites of northeastern British Columbia. I've been to these places and I come home and I still say we win. We win because we're surrounded by 63 petrochemical refineries. We are the who's who. From Dow Chemical to Syncrude to Suncor, they're all completely surrounding our territory. They're at our fence lines. Not their fence lines, our fence lines. So when I was asked to come down here and talk, the very first thought that my boss said, because I'm the environmental policy analyst for the Southern First Nations Secretariat, which is the tribal council for the First Nations down there, he said, "Well, why are you going down?" The same thought as the CBC guy. Everybody's seen a dream catcher? There's two stories to a dream catcher. I'm going to explain both of them here really quickly here. There's the story of the dream catcher, and then there's a story created to sell dream catchers. And the story told to sell dream catchers very successful. But the reality of the dream catcher was it was created by the women of the Anishinaabeg people, and it hung on the tiknog and the baby cradle boards. As they were leaned up against the tree while the mothers tended to their responsibilities, the dream catcher hung there and it resembled a spider's web and it kept the bugs away from the baby. That's the purpose. The reason why it had knickknacks hanging off of it, because it served as a mobile and it entertained the baby while it was there. But that doesn't sell dream catchers, so if you want to buy them at Heathrow, you've got to have a good story, and the story is it catches all of the dreams. And that's what I'm going to use today in context, just to explain Aamjiwnaang to you. There are 4 different dream catchers that I deal with, and the biggest one I deal with is the industrial dream catcher, which is the Suncors of the world. And in their dream catcher, instead of using webbing, we're going to use pipes, and inside of those pipes roll profits all the way around the outside, and that's what all the webbing catches, is the profits. So the quickest route to those profits is to sidestep where the dreams are supposed to be caught and the bad dreams go into center. The profits roll down and they drip right on down into the shareholders of these companies. Now I want to just say that most people who own shares in these companies have no idea what's going on. They bought them through mutual funds, they get them through the retirement programs, they get them in a manner that they're just another line item on the retirement sheet. So part of what's going to happen at the Enbridge and what happens at other AGMs is we point out to the shareholders what their interaction is and how their impacts of these companies are. But inside of those, inside of that dream catcher is all of the webbing that comes down. In the very center of that dream catcher, where the black hole is, that's Aamjiwnaang. We get the nightmares. We are the first human population in this world to have documented endocrine disruption. What that means is we have more girls being born than boys. We have 2 girls for every boy. We're the first human population in the world to have this. Such fanfare this created in the academic and scientific world that the very next day after this report hit the thing, the first professor came to Aamjiwnaang from Sweden and he said, "We want to study you." And there it started. And we've been studied to death ever since. Inside that black hole, there was people like myself and Ada Lockridge. There's only been 3 or 4 people in Aamjiwnaang that took on the fight. And we're in there, and I compare us to the Who's in Whoville. We're deep inside of that black hole and we're screaming out as best we can, help us, help us, help us. I was a health and safety officer in the automotive industry. What the hell do I know about environmental sciences? Ada's a single mom. What does she know about reaching out into the academic world or the NGO world for help? And here we are, we're screaming as loud as we can, and eventually somebody hears us and they come and they reach in that hole and they pull us up a little bit. And that organization was called Eco-Justice. Eco-Justice is today my lawyers in the first of its kind ever lawsuit ever launched in North America. We challenged a charter challenge that it's an inherent human right to be able to step outside and not breathe air that's not harmful to your health. That's never been done before. That lawsuit brought CNN to Toronto to cover it. That's how big this is. Because they're looking at what's happening from this lawsuit in the US. They know that whatever rule happens here will echo down there. It's a human right to breathe air that isn't harmful to our health. I went to Fort Chip, the meeting he's talking about 6 years ago. I went up there, and I'm sitting in the front row, and I'm hearing everybody talk. And what struck me in Fort Chip was on the walls were poster-sized pictures of all the community members who had passed from cancers that year. And it really hit me hard because in Aamjiwnaang on Aboriginal Day, we fire a cannon off for everybody who's died. So before the fireworks and the celebrations of Aboriginal Day comes on, we have about a half an hour of a cannon and a moment of silence, and a cannon and a moment of silence. Now think about this. We're a community of 2,000 people. We're losing 40 people a year to cancer. So I'm in Fort Chip and I'm looking around the walls, and most people aren't really paying attention to what's going on, but I get it. I get it in a way that I can't understand how they're living. Because yes, I get a cannon fire and I get the name and I remember the person. They're looking at the person, they're staring down at this person. Talk about the pressure on you to try to fix this. Because that's what these people are screaming at us. Stop it from happening. Now I come to these places every week. I speak all over the world to this exact issue, and I can tell you I speak to the choir every time. Nobody here is for industry. Nobody here is anti what we're talking about. Everybody here backs us. But we're still in that hole. We're still the Who's down in Whoville, and none of the people will come to Aamjiwnaang. We're the most polluted spot in North America. Suzuki doesn't show up. Environmental Defense doesn't show up. Pollution Probe doesn't show up. Nobody shows up. Nobody comes to help us. They all run off to the tar sands, or they all run off to the boreal forest, or they all run off to northern British Columbia, but they all live here in Toronto. So while they're here in Toronto, they're dictating to the McGuinty government that it's okay to do the Ring of Fire in Northern Ontario. They're dictating to the Harper government that it's okay to run over Fort McKay. They're dictating to the Harper government that it's okay to decimate the West Coast and the East Coast, the untalked about disaster in Canada. What goes on the coast of Newfoundland would not be allowed anywhere else in North America. But because if you go to Newfoundland and you question it, you're anti-development and you're run out of town on a rail. I tried. We tried it in 4 different ways to get a campaign in Newfoundland, and nobody would touch it. There is nobody overseeing what's happening in the North Atlantic. Nobody. There's nobody overseeing what's going on in Aamjiwnaang. A lady came by, her name was Pam Calvert, and you probably never heard of this lady's name. She was a bookkeeper. Now, how many people think a bookkeeper makes a lot of money? In the United States, you get a different credit card application every day in the mail. Pam Calvert read my story in the San Francisco Chronicle and filled out every credit card application that came to her. She amassed $1 million worth of credit and financed the film. Exactly. This bookkeeper financed the film. And it's called The Beloved Community. It's a really, really good documentary on my community, but it was more the impact of that. PBS bought it off her when it was done, and she recouped all of that money, but had they not, she was walking into bankruptcy. That was belief in what was happening. In the tar sands, it's really funny. I taught at Trent, and I get a phone call, and it's Neil Young. Y'all heard of Neil Young? Neil Young's calling me, asking me if I know people in the tar sands that I can refer him to because he wants to make a movie in